it's hard to argue with a story.
Someone shoved me and said faggot.
Hope really only wants students of color here because the expectation is for us to teach white students how to interact with us.
We don't hate the administration, we don't hate any of the deans, we just want to keep the college moving.
It's part of our everyday lives.
Part of Hope College's written mission statement is to produce graduates who are prepared to bridge boundaries that divide human communities.
Like many other small Christian colleges, Hope is an institution being challenged to re-examine their traditional values in a world that seems to be increasingly opposed to those ideals.
As students that are attending Hope College, we were curious to look into a student activist group formed recently at our school that is advocating for such changes.
My name is Eunice Maruhi, an international student from Kenya.
And my name is Ben Dauma, and I hail from the American Midwest. This film documents our findings on the 95 Stories student activist group and the general climate of the minority experience at Hope College.
So, what is the 95 Stories?
So the 95 Stories began, I think, when a few of us seniors were kind of gathered together. We both felt the same general frustration with all the issues that LGBT people and people of color have been facing. We talked about basically a movement that would align the intersections, that people could join voluntarily, that wasn't part of the institution, that could draw up some proposals or plans for the college to implement with time.
The 95 Stories is pushing for 8 policy changes that might allow the Hope community to offer tangible support and equity to LGBT students and students of color. Most of these proposals demand inclusivity and direct action towards increasing diversity.
When you think about a class picture, like your senior class picture, and there's lots and lots of folks there, whenever you get the picture back, what's the first thing we do? Is we try to look for where we are, right? We're pointing ourselves out, or we're looking for ourselves in the picture.
Being a person of color, you kind of, when you walk into the room and you see somebody else who looks like you, there's the sense of, I can breathe.
We reached out to students who are part of underrepresented communities and asked them to share their experiences at Hope. A lot of students were hesitant to come forward with their stories, but we were able to gather a few.
The stigma that Scott Hall is the minority dorm, which really makes me mad, because it's we should have this diversity all across campus. Yes.
Hope really only wants students of color here because the expectation is for us to teach white students how to interact with us, and that is not. And I think that is not our job. By doing that, Hope is only allowing for more acts of discrimination to happen against us.
When the issue is about talking about something about race or politics, they all kind of just stare at you and kind of wait for you to say the same thing. So I always feel like they're waiting for me to kind of set the tone.
I was very, very nervous coming into Hope, knowing that I am a part of the LGBT community and that I want that to be an active part of my life. So I did a lot of research beforehand. A lot of it is very, very underground. Trying to get resources from the counseling office. I had to jump through a lot of hoops there and oh, I don't know who you should call. I will contact this person who will contact this person who will contact this person who might know something.
Being the spokesperson for the whole black race.
Yes.
Yeah, I know everything about blacks and I don't know anything about African culture.
Given the statistics, one of the 95 Stories proposals calls for expanding ethnic diversity of faculty and staff.
So if you look at mathematics, for example, is the number of white males going into that is a much higher percentage than there are African American males.
One of the characteristic responses it's kind of resounded throughout higher education is we want to hire more folks from underrepresented backgrounds, but we can't find them. We don't know where they are. Well, where have we looked?
When we compete for a faculty member in mathematics, the pool is going to be small for underrepresented faculty members, and we're competing against everybody.
If you're in the grocery store and you're looking for potato chips on the baking aisle, then chances are you're not going to find them. It doesn't mean that they're not there.
I grew up in the 70s when the conflict over the Vietnam War was at its peak. The U.S. is more polarized now than it was then. And the church has been caught up into that, and there are Christians on both sides of all sorts of issues, including the whole question of LGBTQ relationships, but racially and in other ways.
I really love Hope College, and I continue to enjoy a lot of what Hope has to offer. I can also say that there have been times when I have experienced prejudice. There have been times when I have experienced marginalization.
Being a student of color and an LGBT student at the same time at Hope is very challenging. It's almost like death by a million paper cuts.
I wear my hat that says girls like girls a lot. And one time I was walking back from class to my cottage and someone shoved me and said faggot. And just like kept walking.
I was part of POL, and we were doing the rope run where you're just running around campus, everything like that, cool. I had an odd year alumni come up to me. He started getting in my face, started talking about how I look pretty in pink because I had all my pink nail polish, talking about how, like, just mocking my rainbow bracelet I wear at all times, stuff like that, and just talking about how I'll look even better crying on the side of the river because of all of that.
I've sat in spaces where people are adamantly arguing that LGBT people don't belong in the church and that my existence in itself is sinful. I've heard my friends be taunted about being deported, having their families deported. I've had my friends called the N-word.
In class, like if you're the only black person in class, if you ask questions, they won't necessarily answer it. But if a white person like literally copies the same question or like rephrases 2 words, they're like, oh, that's a great question.
This one student just kept accusing me. She was so certain that I had stole her phone charger. And I'm just like, I don't have your phone charger. But like I kept hearing every day that like she was so certain that it was me until like eventually she found her own phone charger in her own book bag. Just after discrimination came from another person of color, so that really does hit me hard. But granted, this student was adopted too by a white family, so that may have an influence on that.
As a student that was present on campus during the 2016 presidential election, it was obvious that the campus was very divided at the time.
So I was just kind of sitting in my room in disbelief and shock, and went to my first class and just, which was also, there were several students of color in that class, and my professor just let us talk because none of us knew what to do or how to feel about it.
There was a Confederate flag hanging off there.
There was a group of people walking around campus chanting.
Build that wall.
We had students walking downtown. We had a student who was spat upon. We had students who were yelled at that they should go home from a car driving through campus. And of course, these were students who were students of color. And it doesn't matter where they were born, but assumptions were made.
I was looked in the eye and told that Trump was going to get all of those people out of here.
While many students didn't feel a direct impact, the results from election night led to some students experiencing direct threats to their safety.
I got a text from my roommate saying, "You need to lock our door." People had started threatening to come into Scott Hall, to trash things, to go into people's rooms, getting death threats through their printers. We had campus safety stationed outside our building, a campus safety officer inside our building.
I know that there were students who stayed in their rooms for a few days. They didn't feel comfortable coming out. Not because anything that had happened to them directly, but just this sense of it's not safe right now for a person of color to be out and about.
After hearing so many stories of discrimination, including those that happened during and after the 2016 elections, we asked some members of the administration if the perpetrators were held accountable.
In those instances, I think, yes, some folks were held accountable. In other instances, no.
I know, for example, with the 95 stories, the college has reached back to those people who have put those together and said, do you want us to investigate any of these things? And if you do, we need to be able to talk to those individuals. And again, so if those individuals don't want us to investigate, we can't just simply say, here's a story, here's an outcome.
I think the 95 stories speak to a lot of frustration and a lot of sadness and a lot of disappointment that students experience from discriminatory events that have happened on campus.
As a faculty member, you're here for the students, and to hear that students were having those kinds of experiences, you know, it was just heartbreaking.
It seems to me that Hope has made the decision to really view our LGBT plus students as being in conflict with our Christian faith.
One thing that's difficult about discrimination against LGBT people is that it's unique in being a disrespect that is based on morals. So when people are discriminating against you, they're going to say, I am treating you in this way because I believe that you are inherently in the wrong, morally speaking. I believe that something about you is corrupt. Maybe I believe that you can spread that corruption to other people.
Do you want to go? I think the story starts with you. I found out that she wasn't straight.
This girl's giving me really intense eye contact and I don't know what it means.
Being at Hope as a same-sex couple is interesting.
It becomes all of who you are, and you're not a student anymore, you're not a friend, you're not an athlete, you're not whatever you're studying, it all becomes you're gay. I remember there was one time when we were at a coffee shop and I grabbed her hand and there was just this audible like
One of the events that brought the 95 stories to the public eye was their demonstration at Hope College's Christmas Vespers concert in 2017.
A few of us seniors were kind of gathered together.
Josh was going to be graduating, and he was feeling like he was running out of time, and so he took drastic measures.
The more we looked at Vespers, the more it made sense. Like, a lot of us were really sad we had to do it, but white people aren't going to move until you actually shock them. They don't get angry as easily because they don't have as much to be angry about.
The demonstration involved 4 students. One was outside distracting the security guards. 2 of them were in the balcony waiting to throw flyers into the crowd at Josh's signal. Josh, being part of the chapel choir, initiated the demonstration by stepping out of the formation of the choir.
I took it out from under my robes, unrolled it in front of the stage, and walked out.
He walked down the center aisle, and then I gave him the poster to tape up on the wall.
I was with the students in the balcony throwing flyers over.
Due to the importance of Vespers to the Holland community and Hope College's music department, the majority of the college viewed the demonstration as poorly timed and counterproductive.
A lot of the members of the team lost a lot of friends, and I think members of the music department were especially hurt.
We didn't have to face any of the ramifications that came to the LGBTQ community here after that.
When you have someone do something and disrupt something with not a lot of explanation, I'm not sure how that helped.
It just needed to be more formed and more thought through before it was actually put through.
Despite the backlash, the team still stands firm with their decision to demonstrate during the 2017 Vespers concert.
Do you regret doing it? And absolutely not.
No regrets.
I think we executed it damn well.
Activism is a critical discipleship component for anyone who would claim to be a follower of Jesus. And now I'm not saying, right, that everyone needs to be out in the street with a poster or a bullhorn every day. Like, that's not, activism manifests itself in very creative ways and very beautiful ways.
Now, it's funny as well, because in the end, there were 4 students who participated in the protest. 2 were white and got away with almost no punishment but a light warning.
I literally just got a letter of warning. That's it.
I was slapped on with, papers and essentially, Hope exile.
Western Theological, because of its close relationship to Hope College, got wind very quickly, which ultimately led to my expulsion from seminary. On the grounding, right, like the real basis for it was that I had displayed a lack of readiness for leadership and ministry by encouraging students to demonstrate.
People may view demonstrations like this as signs of a brand new movement, but the LGBTQ community has been present throughout much of Hope's history.
I've met alumni who were here in the 60s and in the 70s and in the 80s. We want to pretend that this is a new thing.
A lot of the younger alumni are not donating to Hope because that statement is still there.
Right, yeah. I think that's something, like I said earlier, like, they got to catch up.
Yeah.
That is something that's going to have to go eventually.
It is enormously important for colleges like Hope or seminaries like Western. The practice of academic freedom is something that you hear about kind of in the abstract, but it gets very concrete with an issue like, what do you make of LGBTQ relationships? And if students don't feel the freedom to explore, to ask questions, then it's all suppressed.
I think the things that are represented in the proposals are coming from a place that's well thought, that is representative of the kinds of experiences that folks are having.
There's a line in Hope College policy that says Hope College is committed to the concept of equal rights and not to equal rights.
That's a small nuance of a statement, but I think it's very powerful. That commitment is lacking. I don't think that Hope College is currently doing enough.
I think our non-discrimination statement is a policy that the Compliance and Audit Committee of the board is working through and looking at. And we're looking at the definitions of how we understand when we use the term sex, what is that referring to in terms of gender identity and sexual orientation, and whether we ought to be more expansive than that. And I think that's an ongoing conversation.
Another proposal calls for voluntary gender-inclusive housing for trans and non-binary students.
I walk out of my door into the hall. There's literally another door between me and all the rest of the doors. I'm literally isolated.
The proposals also call for a gay-straight alliance, which has existed in the past, but was shut down very quickly. It existed from March of 2001 to September of the same year.
If you're an ally and you're here at Hope, please push whenever you possibly can for a gay-straight alliance, because that's the closest we're ever going to get to an LGBTQ official group on campus.
The 95 Stories also demands that the college drafts formal and firmly practiced position statements condemning all manner of white supremacy, including KKK symbolism, Confederate flags, slogans, and symbols of white supremacy, and alt-right material.
There has been occasions where, for example, students have had different symbols that have been offensive that we have taken action. But if you have a symbol that's offensive and it's in your room and it's behind a door in your room, is that your private space or a public space? And do I have a right to go into your private space and tell you you can't have that?
The 95 has pushed for more intergroup dialogue, including a direct administrative response to activism and advocacy.
I just couldn't really find a good space to talk about the intersection of my faith and my sexuality, which are now two big parts of like my day-to-day life.
Being two Christian women who are together, having a hard time finding people who will even validate our relationship and then talk to us about how to pursue God together.
And I've never felt closer to God than when I've been with Becca.
If you looked last year at DACA, the two students came to me and said, we'd like to march. And I said, okay, let's work with City Hall to see if we can't do that and how we do that well.
I think that everything that's represented in the proposals is absolutely on the table for conversation.
In our conversations with students, many of them pointed to the Center of Diversity and Inclusion, or CDI, and the organization named GLOBE as examples of what the administration should be striving to expand.
GLOBE is a support group. It is, I think, at last count, around 90 students.
A lot of people didn't know this group even existed.
I felt like I was joining a secret society.
Honest to God. They had a table at the student activities fair this past fall. I was so happy. That was literally a dream of mine since like freshman year when I first found out about it.
I do feel that CDI is a safe space for me. And it's always like a breath of fresh air, just being in that space and not having to filter who I am as a person, and just the way that I grew up, the way that I speak, things like that. Just to go to a room once in a while and just not have to worry about the impressions I'm making on other people.
Those who founded the 95 Stories graduated and left a new leadership. The group has continued in its plight to get the 8 proposals passed.
The 95 Story students gathered quietly, respectfully when the Board of Trustees was meeting earlier this fall. It was very appropriate.
We held up cardboard signs with the 95, or at least some of the stories, 95 stories written on them.
We're hoping that they see the stories and they see our faces and they realize that these aren't just 8 proposals on paper, but rather they're students' lives that they could potentially be voting on.
One of the things that really like pushed me to go to Hope actually was how they were giving out those little.
That was 95.
Love Thy Neighbor's Day was an event organized by the 95 during an admitted students' day at Hope. They handed cookies, pins, buttons, and resource booklets to prospective students.
These little ribbons and the little refugees welcome.
We're not demanding enough, I think. 95 Stories is a beginning.
Resilience is an adaptive strategy in the face of stressors, and I just wish we didn't have to have all of those stressors.
I think it would be important for the college to begin to look at privilege and who holds privilege and how do they do that and how is that continued and how is that supported.
I shouldn't have to ask somebody, do you like boys or do you like girls or do you like both or what do you like? I should just assume that they're going to love someone.
Just using that neutral language and being okay and asking questions like, hey, I noticed that you have a rainbow flag sticker on your backpack. Are you gay? And it's like, they don't ask it like, are you gay?
So it's like,
just like it's a normal question.
The impact of having somebody tell you that you are valid and that you are worthy and that you are loved is so important when people around you are telling you that your entire existence should be reduced to this one label.
If there was ever a time when the church needed to ask itself, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus in particular? And what does that call me to be and to do in this particular context?
My ideal Hope College environment, I guess, would be a place where my friends and I can be in existence with ourselves and not be exhausted.
An ideal Hope College looks like beloved community.
My ideal Hope College is one where I can feel nurtured as a Christian without having to fight to be seen as a lesbian first.
My hope for Hope College is the same hope I have for the church, that we're not always just catching up with the secular world and whatever trends happen to be, whether they're good or bad, is that we are leading the forefront. We're right on the forefront, on the front lines of social justice. Hope is too good not to be better, and I think that's my philosophy about it.
My dream, my vision would be to see that students could show up day one at whatever institution that they chose to and feel like, finally, here, I most definitely, regardless of where I may have come from, I know here today, there is space for me to breathe,